As a long-time FPS player and complete newcomer to the MOBA space, the learning curve behind Deadlock has felt less like a curve to climb and more like a cliff to scale for me. Outside of heroes and learning the game's abilities, counters, and just how the builds work, the general game flow is enough to send your head into a spin. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I'm an authority on this game by any stretch of the imagination yet, but I've certainly learned some things that I wish I had known on day one, and given this game is garnering a lot of attention right now, I've got a feeling that there's going to be a lot of people who are in my shoes, completely new to the MOBA scene, keen to check this game out on a whim. So I wanted to do a video that particularly spoke to those of you out there who are stumbling their way through the game, trying their damnedest but not getting anywhere, and share some key things that I've picked up on to get better. To a lot of the MOBA veterans out there, some of this stuff is likely to feel a bit obvious to you all, which is okay. If you have any tips that you'd like to share in the comments, or you want to tell me that I'm just straight up plain wrong, either or would be appreciated, and I can take it. Anyways, we'll start off with the first little tip that I have for you all today, and that is not only staying in your lane in the early game, but also prioritizing how you engage targets in your early lane game. The very first indication I get that someone is new to MOBAs is that they start prioritizing hero kills rather than focusing on farming the creeps and denying souls on enemy creep kills. I say that because, well, it's exactly what I was doing when I first started playing the game. But ultimately, the first thing I learned while playing Deadlock is that the early game is all about farming up your souls and trying to get the advantage on your direct opponent with how many items you can buy and how many upgrades you can get on your abilities. In this game, farming the creeps and also focusing on denying enemy soul orbs is the most efficient way to do that. Every moment that you spend focusing on the opponent player or players in your lane is time spent away from dealing with creeps or denying enemies souls, which that in particular, by the way, is such a great way to either equalize the playing field if you're behind on souls, or just to, further extend your lead if you've already got one. Going for kills early game while your damage is not that great is a time-consuming process, and in the time that it takes for you to thirst out your kill, you probably could have earned the same amount of, if not more souls, just farming the lane. Now, that's not to say that you shouldn't be applying pressure to your opponent when the time is right. Scoring some damage when the time is right can be a good way to keep them on the back foot and also to give you more opportunities to make that killing blow when it presents itself. But those killing blows should come at opportune moments, rather than being your hyperfixated personality for the early game. Further to that, managing your aggression in the early game is also a big deal as well. While it may feel good for the ego, it's not always the most efficient way to farm your lane by pushing your opponents all the way back to their guardian and keeping them there. Sometimes you'll have a bit of a better time if you give enemies some breathing room to come back into the middle of the lane a bit more. This is particularly useful on assassination characters like Haze, where you really need that CQC playground to work with, and keeping your opponents stuck at guardian is only going to limit your flexibility as a player as well. Now, staying on the topic of the start of the game here for a moment as well, if you think you're going to be at a disadvantage in your lane off the bat based off of the hero you're versing, you can arrange to swap with your teammates immediately. The game assigns you a lane from the get-go, and in the pre-game lobby, you can see the opponent you've been paired up with. If you believe you're going to be at a disadvantage off the rip, then you can consider negotiating with your teammates to do a swap on the lanes in question. There may even be an opportunity to better exploit your character on other lanes depending on the heroes they're matched up with, or whether you're in a duo or a solo lane. For example, I found that Bebop in particular is far better in a duo lane with his hook ability because it allows you to isolate targets into 1v2 situations for easier kills. On the contrary, McGinnis is insanely powerful in solo lane positions with her wall ability and her turrets. It basically allows her to control the flow of battle all by herself without the need of a second player. It's just something to play your mind to as you start learning the heroes and the abilities in the game. Just because the game assigns you a lane, it doesn't mean you need to commit to it, assuming you communicate with your team and agree on a swap. And to be abundantly clear here, in the early game in particular, you should not be swapping lanes if you are leaving something open for a free win on the enemy side, like by leaving a lane completely unattended, or by simply making a 2v2, a 2v1 situation type deal. Now anyway, moving on, something else that really sunk in for me as I put more hours into the game is that just because you have an ability upgrade slot to spend doesn't mean you should spend it immediately. Depending on your character or the build that you're playing with on said character, there's times where stacking an ability with upgrades actually affords you more power than just randomly shotgun blasting your ability points across all 4 slots as you can afford them. Thankfully, if you're playing with a build that is publicly listed, some of them will have a listed upgrade and unlock order on all the abilities that best play to the strengths of the build, which can go a long way to informing how you should be ranking your abilities and what you should be saving up for. For example, the Vindicta build that I've been running lately is best supported by max ranking your sniper rifle ultimate as fast as you can. Now don't get me wrong, it's a gun build and it absolutely shreds, but by maxing out the ultimate, I'm able to finish off so many targets that would otherwise get away when you get them down to around, 30% HP and they start to really panic and make a run for it. It complements the build nicely and it allows for so many more confirmed kills. So as a result, I'll often hold off upgrading anything else until I completely max out that ultimate ability, and then I'll start speccing out accordingly. And this same mentality can be applied to any build and character in the game as necessary. It'll take time as you understand each character and the build you're working with and how certain abilities complement each other, but I have found that with a bit of patience, you can really turbocharge your build's effectiveness and really take a lead in the early game in particular. Now, albeit, a lot of these tips so far have been very much more relevant for the early game above all else. And there is a reason for that. It's the side of the game that I've been trying to improve with the most, but I will say if there's one thing I've learned fast about Deadlock, and lightly more MOBAs in general, it's that situational awareness is so bloody important. And look, as someone who is an FPS player, man, there were so many times in this game where I caught myself charging down some poor player, like a pit bull in a park who just spotted an unattended child, and I would go on the target, completely forgetting where I was on the map. One of the key things I learned about MOBAs more broadly is that, well, you just can't chase down every target that you see. Sometimes you have to take the L, turn around, and go home. You see, folks, you've really got to have an eye on the map at all times to work out, which lanes are where as far as control is concerned, where your supporting creeps are, and whether you're isolated from your team more broadly, where the enemy heroes are, and whether or not you're at risk of having one flex off of their lane to come and get a gank on you. Or are the team about to find themselves in a team fight scenario where your presence may be the difference between a win or a loss. These are all things you need to consider, and while being concentrated on what was going on ahead of you is, important, and it will get you the wins you need, you also need to be aware of what's going on around you at all times. Isolating a target and using up all of your stamina or abilities to secure a kill is all well and good and all, but are you going to feed the enemy team a free kill in the process? Not all trades are good ones to make, especially as the respawn times get longer. And being aware of the situation you are in is key to ensuring that you get clean kills and are not trading in every single engagement that you land yourself into. It also comes down to making sure that you aren't just farming jungle creeps or smashing crates when your team needs you either. Again, this is all stuff that you will learn over time as your game sense improves, but I really wanted to highlight it in this video because, well, it's just that little wake-up call that I needed to get a bit better at Deadlock as I learned the game. The last big lesson that I think I've really been taught while playing Deadlock as of late, guys, that I wish I'd known sooner, not using your abilities just because you can is also insanely important. There are multiple abilities in this game that can completely deny an enemy's ultimate usage, which in turn can be the make or break between you winning a team fight. For example, there was a game where I was playing Lash recently, and we had an enemy Haze that was constantly just pushing into team fights, dropping her ultimate, and wiping the floor with us. It happened multiple times, and we really had to reevaluate how we were engaging these team battles. But then something wild happened. I grew a brain cell and decided to use Lash's ultimate ability, which in turn grabs up enemies from the ground and slams them back on the ground, stunning them on the ulting Haze. And it completely cancelled out her ultimate and gave us the win in that team fight. Going forward, I only reserved my ultimate ability for the rest of that game to deal with the Haze in particular should she start ulting in a team fight. And it worked. Something fierce. And that exact moment really taught me the importance of managing your ability economy and making sure that you had the right abilities available to you for the right engagement type. Dropping a 7 ultimate on one person and a bunch of creeps may feel a bit disrespectful and a bit cool, but it's going to leave you on the short end of the stick should the rest of the team decide to come and gank you, or should you get into a team fight where that ultimate would have otherwise been far more efficient. This sounds like really surface level stuff, I know, but as somebody who got into the game and was struggling to get kills and decided that I just, jam all my abilities onto a fight and would secure my kills that way, yes, you do get the kills, but it's also not quite as conducive to having the right stuff at the right time to deal with the right engagement type. So being a little bit careful in how you use your abilities and making sure the correct abilities are available for when you need them most is going to be really key, especially in your late game battles in Deadlock. But folks, that is going to be everything for today's video. Again, I know for a lot of the MOBA veterans out there, this may have seemed like a bit of a nothing kind of video, but I know for me, these were very important things that I learned that I'm sure will apply to a bunch of newer players out there as well. So if you guys enjoyed the video or found some value in it, please be sure to hit the like button. It does go a long way to supporting the channel. And leave a comment down below. What tips do you have for Deadlock so far? I might apply some of them to my own game, and I may even make a follow-up video in the future going over some of those more advanced tips that you guys are sharing as well. If you guys are new and you enjoyed the content, hit the subscribe button. We've got a lot of videos coming out for both Deadlock, but also first-person shooter games more broadly, given that that's my bread and butter. But until next time, folks, I will catch you all in the next one, and peace out. Have yourselves a great morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are in the world. Cheers, guys. Have a good one.